The frozen plains of Cryo weren't just a dead world. They were a world designed to kill. The wind itself howled like a living thing, an entity that wanted to scour all life from the ice-blasted rock with its needle-sharp crystals of frozen ammonia. Nothing grew here. Nothing lived here. It was a forgotten tomb at the edge of the galaxy, and in the heart of its worst blizzard, 2 dragons lay dying. Dark blood, almost black in the gloom, stained the snow in a wide circle around them. The elder Ignis had scales the color of cooling embers, a deep, burnished bronze, now scarred by deep cuts and the frost that was slowly turning him to stone. One of his magnificent wings, which had once surfed the solar winds of new star systems, was twisted at an impossible angle, shattered and useless. Beside him, linked by the same cruel chain, lay Umbra. She was younger, her obsidian scales seeming to drink the last of the light from the sky. Her breath came in shallow, ragged bursts, each one a cloud of vapor that froze instantly and fell like scattered diamonds. Hours ago, she'd tried to lift her head in a final act of defiance, but the chain binding her to Ignis held her fast. This was no mere iron link. It was a siphon chain, a masterpiece of Dominion cruelty. It didn't just restrain, it drained the very life force, the inner fire, of any being it touched. With every passing moment, it grew colder. A parasite made of pure entropy. The Kararith Dominion had ambushed them. It was a calculated, overwhelming attack. They'd harried them across 3 systems, a desperate, searing scar across the star charts. But the Dominion was patient. They drove them here, to this desolate rock, crippled them, and then simply left. Why waste another volley of plasma? Cryo would do their work for them. The cold was a far more patient executioner. Ignis kept his one good eye open, just a slit of molten gold against the graying of his scales. He watched the snow fall, not with anger, but with a soul-deep weariness. He had lived for millennia. He'd seen empires rise and stars die. He had danced in the nebulae of creation and sung songs that could crack moons. To end here, frozen and forgotten. It was an indignity so profound it was almost a cosmic joke. "It's quiet," Umbra whispered, her voice a faint rasp in his mind. It was the only way they could still speak. Ignis didn't answer right away. He gathered what little strength he had left into a single thought. The universe usually is, just before the end. "I'm so cold, old one," she sent, a tremor of fear in her thought. It wasn't a fear of death, but of the slow, grinding diminishment that came before it. "My fire. It's just a candle flicker." "I know," Ignis replied, his own inner furnace now just a bed of dying coals. "But we have known great fires. Little sister, we have burned brighter than any star. Remember that, let it be your last warmth." They fell silent again, with only the howl of the wind for company. They had been proud. They had been magnificent. And now, they were just meat waiting for a planet to claim them. Ignis felt his consciousness begin to fray, the edges blurring into the storm's whiteout. This was it. The long twilight was finally fading to black dot, and then, just as acceptance began to settle over him like a final shroud of snow, he saw it. A figure, a single, dark shape moving against the shrieking white dot. It was impossible. A hallucination? The final trick of a dying mind? Ignis squeezed his eyes shut, then forced it open again. The shape was still there. It was small, impossibly small, and it was stumbling through a storm that could tear armor from a starship like it was a minor inconvenience. "Umbra," he sent, the thought faint, wavering. "Do you see that?" He felt a stir beside him, a faint tremor through the siphon chain connecting them. "A shadow," she replied, her mental voice weak with confusion. "A trick of the light? The cold is taking our minds." "No," Ignis insisted, a spark of something he hadn't felt in days, curiosity flickering to life. "It's moving with purpose." The figure drew closer, staggering but relentless. It wasn't a creature of Cryo. There were none. It wasn't Dominion. Their patrols used sleek, silent skimmers. They didn't walk. This thing was utterly alone, a solitary speck of defiance in a world built to erase life. As it neared, the shape became clearer. 2 legs, 2 arms, a bulky, insulated shell. The wind parted for just a second, and in that merciful lull, a truth more impossible than any hallucination struck Ignis like a physical blow. It was a human. Humans. The name echoed in the depths of Ignis's long memory. Soft, fragile beings from a temperate deathworld who had clawed their way to the stars through sheer, stubborn persistence. They weren't known for their power or physical might. They were known for being adaptable, and some said, for their irrational refusal to accept the inevitable. They did not survive cryostorms, and they certainly did not walk into them alone. A human Umbra breathed into his mind, her shock a perfect mirror of his own. It must be lost. Its ship must have crashed. Then it will die here with us, Ignis concluded, the flicker of curiosity snuffed out by grim reality. Just another piece of kindling for Cryo's pyre. The human stumbled the last few dozen yards, its movements slow and pained. It finally stopped just outside the ring of their frozen blood, a small, hunched shape against the vastness of their suffering. Its environmental suit was a patchwork disaster, torn in several places and sealed with metallic tape that was already peeling in the cold. A cracked visor hid most of its face, but 2 eyes, wide and shockingly steady, peered out. The eyes took in the scene, the two dying giants, the cruel energy-draining chains, the blood-soaked snow, and they showed no fear, only a deep, resonant sorrow. The human took a hesitant step forward, then another. It rested a gloved hand on the siphon chain between them. The alloy was an absolute zero sync, designed to bite through dragon scale and drain life. The human flinched, pulling its hand back with a sharp hiss of pain that was almost lost in the wind. Even through the glove, the chain's life-draining cold had bitten it. A weak, static-laced voice crackled from the human's helmet speaker. It spoke an old language, one Ignis hadn't heard in centuries. Not the arrogant tongue of the Dominion, nor the lyrical trade speech of the Corps, but the guttural cadence of old Terran gods above. What did they do to you? The human whispered. Ignis's ancient mind reeled as his damaged translator implants flickered to life. The sentiment was unmistakable. This wasn't a scavenger come to pick their bones. It wasn't a conqueror admiring his work. It was the voice of pity, empathy. The human seemed to gather itself. It knelt in the snow, ignoring the life-threatening cold, and pulled a bulky pack from its back. With stiff, clumsy fingers, it unzipped a compartment and started pulling out tools. A power conduit, a diagnostic scanner, a plasma cutter with a battery indicator that was blinking dangerously low. Umbra's thought was a wave of disbelief. What is it doing? I don't know, Ignis confessed. He'd expected the human to run, or die, or at best, stare in awe before the storm took it. He had not expected it to try and help. The human fumbled with the scanner, pressing it against the lock on Ignis's shackle. The device whined, its small screen flickering. The human cursed, a short, sharp sound, and banged the scanner against its thigh. It tried again. This time, a string of complex energy readings scrolled across the screen. Dominion Tech, the human muttered, Series 7 siphon lock, biometrically and psychometrically keyed, impossible to pick. It looked from the lock to the chain, then to the identical lock on Umbra linked in a daisy chain. One master control. The human looked up, its gaze meeting Ignis's through the cracked visor. The dragon could see the grim determination there. They didn't just chain you, the human said, its voice louder now. They set you to drain each other. The colder you get, the faster the siphon works. It's a feedback loop, a death engine. Ignis knew this. Of course, he'd been feeling it for days. But hearing it diagnosed so clinically by this tiny, fragile creature sent a fresh spike of dread through him. The human stood, its shoulders slumping for a moment in what looked like defeat. It looked back into the teeth of the blizzard, then back at the two dying dragons. The hesitation lasted only a second before a new resolve hardened its posture. My ship is a wreck, a few clicks from here, the human stated, like it was making a report. Long-range comms are out. Power cells are cracked. I've got maybe 3 hours of suit life left before I freeze solid. Not enough time to go back for what I need. Not even enough time to get myself to shelter. Ignis closed his eye, just as he thought. The human was simply sharing its final moments with them. A strange, fleeting kinship in the face of doom. But, the human continued, and the word hung in the air, sharp and defiant. Ignis opened his eye again. The human held the plasma cutter in one hand and a thick power conduit in the other. Your shackles are connected to a central regulator. I can see its energy signature right there, buried in the ice between you. It's the heart of the system. I can't cut the shackles. This cutter doesn't have the juice, but I might. I might be able to overload the regulator. A sliver of hope, sharp and painful, pierced Ignis's weary resignation. Freedom. Was it even possible? Overload it. Umbra's thought shot through their link, frantic with desperation. Can it really set us free? The human seemed to sense their sudden focus. Here's the problem, it said, its voice grim. My cutter's power cell is nearly dead. To generate the kind of surge I need to blow that regulator, I'd have to bypass the safety protocols on my own suit's core, channel everything I have directly into it. The human paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. My suit's power core is what's keeping me alive. It runs life support, the heaters, everything. If I divert that power, even for a second, the suit shuts down. In this cold, I'd be dead in under a minute. The sliver of hope in Ignis's heart turned back to ice. The human was talking about suicide, a noble, but ultimately pointless gesture. And, the human added, even quieter, there's no guarantee it'll work. The feedback from a detonating siphon regulator is unpredictable. The backlash could travel up the chains and fry what's left of your internal systems. It might kill you instantly. It might leave you alive, but empty. Or, it might do nothing at all, and I'll have died for nothing. The human knelt again, setting the tools on the snow. It looked at them, its gaze unflinching, and then it offered them the impossible. So that's your choice, the human said, its voice cutting through the wind. We can try it. I risk everything on a plan that might kill us all, but might just set you free. Or, we do nothing. We wait. The storm will take us soon enough. A choice. This mortal, this speck of dust on the verge of its own death, was offering them a choice. The Dominion had taken their freedom, their strength, their future. They had left them with nothing. But this human, with its broken gear and dwindling life, was giving them back the one thing that mattered. Agency. The right to choose how they would end. Its mad Umbra sent her thought a jumble of fear and awe, to sacrifice itself for strangers. For Monses? Why? Because it is human, Ignis replied, a strange, forgotten warmth spreading through his chest. He'd seen this before, millennia ago, an illogical, often self-destructive capacity for hope, for action in the face of annihilation. He looked at the human, then at the storm. Far away, almost lost in the screaming wind, he heard a new sound, a faint, rising engine whine, high-pitched and menacing. The human heard it too. Its head snapped up. Dominion Patrol, it stated flatly. Sweeping the crash sites, they'll be here in 20 minutes. Maybe less. The human turned back to them, its posture urgent. So the choice has changed, it said, its voice tight. We try my insane plan right now, or we fight them together, chained and dying against a fully armed patrol. We won't win, but we can make them bleed. The patrol, the final indignity, to be found by their tormentors and finished off like wounded animals. A surge of ancient, defiant rage, the last ember of his heart, flared within Ignis. He would not give them the satisfaction. He looked at Umbra, a question in his gaze. He felt her response immediately, a wave of pure, unadulterated resolve. She would not die a prisoner. Ignis focused all his will. He slowly, painfully, lowered his massive head until his snout was level with the small human. He stared into the cracked visor, pouring every ounce of his conviction into that one point of contact. Do it, Ignis sent, not with words, but with a pure, undeniable feeling of consent, of trust, of a shared, final gamble. The human held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. All right, it breathed, no turning back. The human moved with a speed that defied its frozen state. It was no longer a lost wanderer. It was an engineer, every action precise. It jammed the plasma cutter into the ice, carving a trench toward the regulator's energy signature. Steam and ice shards flew as the weak beam vaporized the permafrost. This is going to hurt, the human grunted, wrestling with the power conduit. It popped open a panel on its own chest, revealing a port pulsing with a soft blue light access to its suit's power core. I'm connecting my cord directly to the cutter's capacitor, then running this conduit straight to the regulator. When I throw the switch, it'll dump everything I have in one go. The human worked frantically, its breath fogging the inside of its visor. The whine of the Dominion Patrol was getting louder, a definite threat cutting through the storm. They had minutes. The backlash is going to be significant, the human said, its voice strained as it connected the final cable to its chest. When the regulator blows, it's going to release all the energy it's siphoned from you. Brace yourselves. It looked up at them one last time. My name is Kalen, the human said, as if it were important they know. It was an honor. With that, Kalen slammed a gloved fist onto a switch on its forearm. For a terrible second, nothing happened. The blue light in Kellen's chest port died. The lights on its suit went out. The human slumped, its body suddenly a puppet held up only by the frozen stiffness of its suit. Then, all of existence seemed to detonate. A wave of pure, white-hot energy erupted from the ground. A shockwave of raw power that vaporized the snow for 100 yards in every direction. The ground bucked violently. The energy surged up the siphon chains, and it felt to Ignis like being struck by lightning. 1 billion volts of his own stolen life force slammed back into him. His ancient body convulsed. Every nerve ending screamed. He saw only white as a searing, cleansing fire roared through his veins, burning away the cold and the despair. It was the worst pain he had ever known, and the most exquisite relief. With a shriek of tearing metal that deafened the storm, the siphon locks on their necks shattered. The chains, now dead, clattered onto the scorched, glassy earth. They were free. Ignis gasped, a real gasp, drawing in a lungful of superheated air. He could feel his inner fire, not just a flicker, but a furnace roaring back to life. Beside him, Umbra was staggering to her feet, her obsidian scales shimmering. She raised her head and let out a roar of triumphant, unadulterated freedom, a sound of power incarnate that hadn't been heard on Cryo in a million years. Their celebration was cut short. Through the steam, 3 shapes resolved themselves. Dominion skimmers, they hovered 30 feet up, their weapon ports glowing with a malevolent green light. The patrol was here, but they weren't focused on the dragons. They were focused on the small, unmoving figure lying on the blackened ground. Len. The human's suit was dark. A patch of something was spreading across the ice beneath its body. Blood. The explosion had torn the suit open. Umbra took a protective step, placing her body between Kalen and the skimmers. Ignis, his strength returning with every beat of his rekindled heart, felt a rage he hadn't known since the ambush. They had taken everything from him. They would not take this human, this small, insane, courageous creature who had walked into death to give them back a choice. One of the skimmers emitted a harsh, synthesized voice. Weapons of the old world. You are designated as rogue assets. Your rescuer is an unregistered combatant. Surrender for decommissioning. Ignis lowered his head. He drew a deep breath, and for the first time in days, he tasted not the cold of his own dying, but the hot, familiar tang of power. He looked at Umbra, who was already coiling to strike. He looked at the small, broken form of Kalen, who had sacrificed everything. The Dominion had made a fatal error. They thought they were finishing off 2 dying prisoners. Instead, they had come face to face with 2 ancient dragons who now had something to fight for. Minutes ago, 2 chained dragons and 1 stubborn human were watching the horizon, waiting for the end. Now, 2 free dragons stood over the body of their savior, ready to unleash millennia of fury. The battle for Cryo wasn't over. It had just begun. If you want to find out if Kalen survives and what happens next, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss part 2. A bond between dragon and human has been forged in ice and fire, and the Dominion is about to learn why you should never, ever corner a creature that has nothing left to lose.